June 18, 1815. Rain soaked the fields of Belgium. Mud covered the ground. The sky was heavy, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Two massive armies stood facing each other. On one side, Napoleon Bonaparte, the man who had conquered Europe, escaped exile, and returned to power in a dramatic comeback no one thought possible. On the other, a coalition determined to end his rule forever. This was not just another battle. This was Waterloo, the day that would decide the fate of Europe and the end of an empire built by one man's ambition. Napoleon's impossible return just 1 year earlier. Napoleon had been defeated and sent into exile on the island of Elba. Europe believed it was finally safe. Kings returned to their thrones. Armies stood down. Peace talks began. But Napoleon was not finished. In March 1815, he escaped Elba and returned to France. As he marched toward Paris, soldiers sent to arrest him instead joined him. Within weeks, he was emperor again. Europe was shocked. They had defeated him once. Now they had to do it again. And this time, they would show no mercy. The enemies gathered. Two main allied armies moved to stop Napoleon. The British led forces under the Duke of Wellington, and the Prussian army under Field Marshal Blücher. Napoleon knew he could not fight them together, so he made a bold plan: defeat them separately before they could unite. At first, it worked. He struck the Prussians at Ligny and forced them to retreat. But they did not collapse. They withdrew and waited. Napoleon then turned toward Wellington's army near a small village called Waterloo. He believed one more victory would secure his power. He was wrong. The night before the battle, heavy rain poured across the fields. Soldiers slept in mud. Cannons sank into the soft ground. Napoleon delayed the attack, waiting for the earth to dry so his artillery could move. That delay would cost him everything, because every hour gave the Prussians time to return. The battle begins late in the morning. French cannons opened fire. The Battle of Waterloo had begun. Napoleon sent waves of infantry toward the Allied lines. The fighting was brutal and close. Smoke filled the air. Drums beat. Muskets fired again and again. One key target was a farmhouse called Hougoumont, defended by British guards. Napoleon meant it to be a distraction. Instead, it became a deadly trap. French troops attacked again and again, but the defenders refused to break. Thousands died fighting for a single building. The French advanced by afternoon. Napoleon launched a massive assault in the center. Columns of French infantry marched forward under heavy fire. But Wellington's troops were hidden behind a ridge, protected from artillery. At the last moment, they stood up and fired point-blank volleys. The French advance slowed, then stalled. Still, Napoleon believed victory was close. So he made his most famous move. The charge of the cavalry. Seeing what looked like movement in the Allied lines, Napoleon ordered thousands of cavalry to charge. It was one of the largest cavalry assaults in history. Horses thundered forward. Sabers flashed. The ground shook. But Wellington's soldiers formed defensive squares, tight formations of bayonets pointing outward. Cavalry could not break them. Wave after wave charged. Wave after wave failed. The fields were soon covered with fallen horses and riders. Napoleon had wasted one of his greatest weapons. The Prussians arrived. Then came the moment Napoleon feared most. In the distance, dust clouds appeared. The Prussians were coming. Blücher's army had marched through mud and chaos to reach the battlefield. Now, they attacked Napoleon's right flank. France was suddenly fighting on two fronts. The trap Napoleon had tried to set was now closing around him. The final throw. The Imperial Guard. As evening approached, Napoleon made one last desperate gamble. He sent in the Imperial Guard, his most elite soldiers. They had never been defeated in battle. If they broke through, victory might still be possible. They marched forward in perfect formation, calm under fire. But Wellington's men held their ground. When the Guard reached the ridge, Allied troops rose and fired. The Guard hesitated. Then they began to fall back. A shout spread across the battlefield. The Guard is retreating. For the French army, it was a shock beyond belief. If the Guard could retreat, defeat was certain. Panic spread. Lines collapsed. Men threw down their weapons and ran. Napoleon's defeat at Waterloo was over. Napoleon's army was shattered. He fled the battlefield, knowing his dream was finished. Days later, he surrendered to the British. This time, there would be no return. He was sent to the remote island of St. Helena, where he would spend the rest of his life in exile. The man who once ruled Europe would never command an army again. Why Waterloo changed history. Waterloo did more than defeat Napoleon. It ended over 20 years of war across Europe. It reshaped borders. It began a new balance of power that kept large-scale war away from Europe for decades. Britain emerged as a global superpower, and the name Waterloo became a symbol of total, final defeat. Napoleon once said, "Glory is fleeting, but obscurity is forever." At Waterloo, his glory faded, but his legend never did. Because on that muddy Belgian field, the world learned something important. Even the greatest conqueror can fall. And sometimes, history turns not on destiny, but on rain, mud, and a single day.